Chapter 5 Eric's Son. Jack and Annie followed the boy up the rocky slope and down the other side. There was a wooden rowboat on the shore. It looked like it had been made by hand. 2 oars were inside. The boy put a spear into the boat, then pushed it halfway into the water. "Sit at this end," he said. "Thanks," said Annie. She and Jack climbed into the rowboat. They sat together on a wooden seat. The boy pushed the boat farther into the water. Then he jumped aboard and sat in the center, facing Jack and Annie. He grasped the oars. He looked over his shoulders to see where to go. Then he pulled the oars through the water and the rowboat began moving away from shore. The wind had picked up and the water was choppy. The rowboat rocked from side to side. "Hold on tightly," the boy said. "If we fall in, we freeze to death." Jack gripped the side of the boat as it bumped through the waves. The boy rowed around a bend in the bay. Then he headed toward the ice barrier trapping the narwhal. He rowed close to a wide, flat chunk of ice. "Hey, you!" Annie called to the whale. "Don't be afraid!" The narwhal was still swimming in circles. He had a cone-shaped body and short front flippers. His long ivory tusk looked like twisted rope. "We've come to help you," said Annie. "We need to break up that piece of the ice," the boy said to Jack. He pointed to the chunk that was blocking the narwhal's escape. "Right," said Jack. "How do we do that?" "Sit here. Hold the boat steady," said the boy. He made room for Jack to sit next to him on the center seat. Then he handed Jack the oars. Jack grasped the wooden handles and tried to keep the boat from tipping over. The boy carefully stood up. He stepped out onto the flat surface. The boat rocked, but Jack used the oars to keep it close to the ice. The boy started kicking the ice chunks. He kicked and kicked. Suddenly he slipped and fell hard onto the icy surface. He clutched his right knee and groaned. "Are you okay?" said Annie. "Yes," said the boy. He tried to stand up, but he groaned again and sat back on the ice. "Wait, I can help," said Annie. Jack held the boat steady as Annie climbed out. She kicked the fallen ice chunk, but it didn't move. "Use the spear," said Jack. He let go of the oars long enough to pick up the boy's spear. "Use it how?" said Annie. "Just take it." Jack held the spear out to her. "Careful, it's super heavy." Annie took the spear with both hands. "Slide it between the chunk of ice and the big iceberg," said Jack. Annie wedged the spear between the 2 solid blocks of ice. "Got it?" said Jack. "Now pull back." Annie pulled hard on the spear. "I can help," said the boy. Even though he was injured, he stood up. He gripped the spear with Annie, and they pulled together. Bit by bit, the ice began to splinter against the steel blade of the spear. Annie and the boy kept pushing and pulling until the fallen chunk of ice finally popped free, like a cork popping out of a bottle. The narwhal kept circling the shallow pool. "This way," Annie called to him. She pointed to the gap in the ice. "Swim through here." The narwhal seemed to understand. He looked at Annie, then turned and shot out through the passage. Jack and Annie raised their arms above their heads and shook their fists. "Yay!" they shouted. The boy looked at them. Then he raised his arms too and shook his fists. "Yay!" he said. Jack and Annie laughed, and the boy laughed with them. For the first time, he seemed like a regular kid, Jack thought. The 3 of them watched the narwhal swim away and disappear into deep water. The boy smiled at Jack and Annie. "You both are strong and smart," he said. "Thanks," they said together. "Are you sure you're okay?" said Jack. "Yes," said the boy. "What's your name?" said Annie. "Ericson," said the boy. "My father is Eric." "Oh, I get it. Your dad is Eric, so you are called Eric's son," said Annie. "Yes," said Ericson. "My name is Jack," said Jack, "and she's my sister Annie." "Where do you live?" asked Ericson. "Far away. We're just visiting Greenland for the day," said Annie. "Do you live around here?" "Yes," said the boy. "Would you like to meet my family?" "Sure," said Annie. "Absolutely," said Jack. Annie climbed back into the rowboat. The boy limped to the edge of the ice. "Do you need help rowing?" asked Jack. "No, thank you. I can still do it," the boy said. Jack carefully stood up. He gave Erikson his hand and helped him into the boat. Then Jack took his seat next to Annie. Erikson picked up the oars. He looked over his shoulder and began rowing through the ice-cold sea water.